Well, for those that are still coming in, you'll catch up, but everyone who is here, we are really happy to welcome you. Thank you for joining us today. So first of all, it's one of we're already well into our January events, but it's one of our few for starting off the new year. And we are excited because one of the things that we really value creating for our members is a connection back to HBS for all of us, because regardless of year, we all left a while ago. And so HBS continues to focus on the quality of education and the quality of the experience on campus. But sometimes we lose track a little bit of that out here in the alumni community. So we as HBSWA, we intend to offer several times a year some information and bring speakers in to help update us on things that are happening live today in the HBS community on campus and in the administration so that we can stay connected as alumni and know how this is benefiting us or how we can participate or to just listen, provide feedback. So today, I'm very excited to welcome Colleen Ammerman from HBS. So Colleen has been a really good friend to HBSWA, and she is the director of the Race, Gender, and Equity Initiative at HBS. So she's going to tell us a little bit today about what that is. But Colleen is really focused on the initiative's research community and the platform for disseminating practice relevant insights for advancing equity, diversity, inclusion in organizations, but also how HBS is thinking about this in the HBS community and the wider alumni community in the world. So we're very happy to have Colleen here today. So she oversees the initiative staff, operations, and activities, and that includes both student and alumni engagement. So she's going to tell us about programs for companies and up-to-date research on this topic. So Colleen, we're very happy to have you today. I believe you have some slides for us. So I will pass over to you so you can begin your session and we will get the slides queued up.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, it's great to see everybody. And it's really nice to be doing this session. It's been very cool for me to see the Women's Association like continue to evolve and grow and obviously become even bigger than, it was when I started working, when it was still the New York Women's Association. I'm wearing my friendship bracelet that I got at the Women's Summit breakfast. So anyway, it's just really cool to be here. So what I am going to do, what I thought would be most helpful, I'll try to kind of give a pretty broad overview of what's going on. I'm going to start off with just giving a bit of an update on what the initiative is and what we do, and that's kind of in the context, to give you a little bit of a context of the landscape of where we sit in the school in terms of the school's work around issues of inequality, diversity, etc. And then I thought I'd just share kind of like a little sampler platter of some interesting research findings from a bunch of faculty, just to give you a sense of the variety of research that our faculty do in this domain and sort of how it relates to practice. And we can, dive deeper, on any of that. And I thought also I'd share kind of some interesting insights from a series of focus groups that we have done in collaboration with the Institute for Business and Global Society over this past year with DEI leaders.
Yay.
So to kind of get a set, it's an interesting time in this space. So this will be continuing, but we've had a lot of conversations and have some interesting themes that we're hearing from the field. And then just, end on, a little bit of how to stay connected with us. So, and we'll have definitely, I think, some time for kind of free form discussion at the end, but I'm happy to take questions or comments or reactions as I go. So please, feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. I'm going to open my chat sidebar. So if you have a question, I'm happy to be interrupted. And before I get started, I was just curious. I wanted to sort of know among those, I see a few familiar names and faces for sure, but just curious to hear, Kathy, if you could do that little poll, sort of the mix of, did you already know about RGE and wanted an update, or, have you not heard of us, or, you have been engaged with anything we've done. So if everybody could just take a quick second, it's just helpful and interesting for me to know sort of about familiarity. We've been around at the school for about 10 years, so we're a small team, and it varies in terms of how visible we are depending on how people connect with the school. So thank you. I'm just curious to hear, although I know several of you are familiar with us, at least a little bit.
Pretty even amount. 17 of 17 have answered. So
okay, great. Okay,
Should be
all
able
right.
to
So
see
we're,
it.
yeah, even distribution. So
Yeah.
a few of you actually didn't know about us, which is great because now you can. And another sort of third of you have heard of us, which is also great, but probably don't know as much about what we do. And of course, always happy to reconnect with those of you who are sort of part of our inner circle. All right, so I'm going to do my screen share now. Make sure you can see my slides. And I think there was a question in the chat from Jenny. Did you mean the list for like the next Women's Summit? What was the question?
No, it just said the first answer was yes, I know it. I'm already on the
Oh,
list, something like that. So
oh,
I'm gonna get on the list.
gotcha. I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. Our list. Yes, I will tell you at the end that we have a mailing list, a link for that, and also some other ways to connect. So I'm gonna mention that at the end, and then I'll share these slides. So there's links to sign up. You can also go to our website and look for the mailing list. But I'm going to share. There's a few different links of ways to get connected. So that'll be in these slides. So we have a newsletter, and also you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're posting a bit more there now, thanks to our terrific associate director. All right. So yeah, definitely, we'd love everyone who's not already on our mailing list or connected with us on LinkedIn, who's here today, to be connected afterward. So I'm going to start off with, like I said, just a little bit of broader context. So thinking about the school. So as I think Elizabeth sort of gestured to, RGE is really focused on kind of the research side of things and our faculty, and thinking about how HBS has an influence on practice and on companies and helps leaders. So that's different from the school sort of internal institutional work on diversity and inclusion, et cetera. Although obviously there is some crossover and we collaborate and support folks who do that work. But I just thought it'd be helpful to give a bit of a snapshot reminder of sort of those two sides of the house, so to speak, and kind of key milestones in each of them. So in terms of HBS as an institution, in 2011, Dean Noria established the first Senior Associate Deanship for Culture and Community, and that is a faculty role that still exists. Kristen Mugford is our current Dean for Culture and Community. And so that is the faculty leader that really focuses on the school's own institutional internal work on being really an inclusive and equitable place for everyone, students, staff, faculty, et cetera. And then in 2021, the school hired on the staff side a chief diversity and inclusion officer, and built out an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So that's kind of fully staffed at this point. So those are kind of the two big institutional pieces. There's a lot of work that goes on outside of that and in other departments and parts of the school, obviously with admissions. One way we have contributed to the school's institutional journey as RGE is to really contribute to this case protagonist race and gender data piece. So the school's doing a lot more tracking and reporting on that than it did when I came to the school back in 2012. So we've contributed to that and kind of helped build some of that out. But the school itself, the Division of Research and faculty have really institutionalized that. Of course, there's a lot going on with individual courses and in the curriculum. Lots of folks thinking about the experience of our MBA students in the classroom and beyond. Same thing for exec ed. So that stuff, and I'm happy to answer questions, kind of about what we do here at the school. But that's sort of everything outside of what RGE does. And we are on the side of the house, along with some other colleagues, that really focuses on how do we continue to foster the scholarly community here at the school, and then take those insights and make them actionable, make them accessible. How do we get them into the hands of leaders, including our alumni, people like you who want to be positive change agents? So the Institute for Business and Global Society is a relatively new organization here at the school that we collaborate with a lot, that has a focus on multiple topics, but inequality is one of them. So they're big partners to us. And then, we're academia, so we're very decentralized. So there's a lot that's happening, driven individually by faculty themselves. There are faculty that are part of kind of research and teaching kind of cross-school consortiums where they think about, diversity in the classroom and in their research, all kinds of networks that go on outside of RGE and BIGS as little mini hubs, for this kind of work, but we really try to be in the know about it and connect those dots as much as possible. So that's just in a broad brushstroke sort of way, where we are at HBS. So I'll just give a little bit of a deeper dive, especially for those of you who weren't very familiar with us, about who RGE, who we specifically are. And so this is our mission, right? So it is grounded in research, but we really think about how do we both catalyze, so encourage new research, help new research to happen, make connections between faculty and between faculty and companies to spark, spark new data, spark new findings and new insights, but then also really take that research, translate it, make it accessible, take it from the academic journal to something that, a manager can read and understand, okay, here's something that's helpful for me to know in my actual job as I try to be inclusive and equitable. And we are, relatively small group, we're small but mighty. So we have 2 faculty co-chairs. So Robin Ely, who I'm sure many of you know and have followed, is our founding faculty co-chair. She is, as of this academic year, now a Baker Foundation professor, which means she's sort of semi-retired, but still teaching and still doing research and co-chairing the initiative, now with Lakshmi Ramarajan, who's been at the school for a number of years, but recently was tenured and promoted, so is now on our senior faculty and has stepped in to co-chair the initiative. So we're very excited about that. She's sort of, bringing her vision and new ideas about what RGE should be in our next chapter. And then we have a small team, myself, an associate director and a manager. We also have, some part-time folks, and we collaborate a lot, not just with BIGS, but with other folks at the school to, use our small group to kind of have a bigger impact. And then we actually have, it may surprise you or may not, about 50 faculty really across all of the school's academic units who are engaged in some way, right? So we have a lot of faculty who are doing research either as kind of their primary research agenda, and I'll talk about some of the folks who have a primary research agenda in our domain, but also a lot who maybe have, a smaller subset of research on diversity, or on gender, on race, and also folks who are engaged and maybe not doing a lot of research in this area, but are writing cases and really thinking about the impact in the classroom. And it's been very exciting to see that grow. So when we launched the initiative, there were probably under 20 faculty, I would say, who were engaged in doing relevant work. And both as the school has hired more people who are doing this work, and as more people who were already here but have gotten more engaged and more invested in these topics. We've got this really great faculty community right here at the school. And then beyond that, we have a much broader network of scholars. And also, I'm going to speak a little bit about this toward the end, of practitioners who engage with us. So that's sort of who we are and what we look like. And this is, I'm going to just give you the quick, this is what I call like my sort of, mini spiel on what we actually do. Yeah, Deborah, did you have a question? Okay, I just thought, sorry, your hand go. Okay. So there's sort of 3 types of things that RGE does, and I've kind of gestured toward them already, and I'll give you some specific examples of what that looks like. But really our remit is, supporting the scholarly community, translating and disseminating the research, and then contributing to sort of, diversity and business education broadly. So these are kind of the 3 types of work that we do. And in terms of the scholarly community, the main way we do that is through an annual research symposium that we hold in the spring, and that our faculty co-chairs lead and co-chair and develop the agenda for. And we have quite a diverse and really stellar network of folks, in a lot of different fields. We have folks who come to that conference who are, organizational behavior and management scholars, but also some folks at law schools, sociologists, psychologists. So it's really kind of like the best of people studying issues of diversity and equity in business. We also do one-off kind of tailored conferences, for researchers led by faculty that are affiliated with RGE. So we did something last year with a faculty member who came to us and said, look, I want to hold kind of a small research, colloquium around the intersection of technology and inequality, right? And these are obviously 2 very hot topics. And so we supported him in putting together this group of about 50 people, again, from a variety of disciplines, really looking at, algorithmic bias, what's happening with AI, how are tech companies grappling with these issues. So we do things like that as well that are one-offs, and again, really about connecting folks at HBS with scholars outside the school to catalyze new research and really have a vibrant scholarly community. We work with BIGS to support the school's racial equity fellows. So this is something you may have heard about in the past couple of years. So when Dean Tatar launched the Institute for Business and Global Society, one of the efforts of BIGS was to host these fellows at the school. And it's a kind of a new model for HBS. We, unlike a lot of other institutions, don't have a lot of visiting faculty, but we decided as an institution, hey, particularly when it comes to issues like climate research and race and racial equity, we want to bring more scholars to the school to really kind of supercharge research that's going on here on these important topics. So Biggs supports climate fellows and also racial equity fellows, and we work with Biggs to kind of co-host those people. So there's 2 terrific fellows at the school this year, and can share a little bit more about them with any questions, who are studying issues of race and racial inequality in organizations. And then we support a couple of multi-faculty research projects. One is an ongoing longitudinal study of alumni that I hope many of you have responded to. We've got a new survey actually coming out any day now. It's called Life and Leadership After HBS. This was launched during the W50 when the school was really interested in better understanding what was going on with our women alums, because frankly, we didn't really have that great of a sense and we hadn't collected a lot of data on it. So that survey was launched then, and now it's been sort of institutionalized as a long-term study where we're looking not just at the experiences of our women alums, although that's still a focus, but more broadly what's going on with our alums as they continue throughout their careers, and also what are their perspectives on important, topics in our domain. We've asked questions, related to the Me Too movement, right, and understanding how alums view that movement, how they view issues of sexual harassment in the workplace. The same thing with asking alums post-2020 about their views about racial equity in the workplace and racial justice. We obviously have learned a little bit about how people coped with COVID and how that impacted work. So all kinds of rich data there. And then we also support another multi-faculty research project, which is the school's partnership with the 110 Coalition, which is a group of companies who have united to focus on hiring and developing workers without 4-year degrees, with a special focus on kind of how this impacts Black workers. So happy to answer questions about any of that, but that's sort of the research base of what we do. And then when it comes to translating and getting that stuff out there to where it can be useful and not just stay, again, in an academic journal, we do lots of stuff here. We do small convenings for practitioners. We do a lot of kind of research spotlights, and you'll see this in our newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, we actually have something coming up soon, spotlighting research from a junior faculty member named Paula Rettel. And we did, we've done some spotlights on Professor Rem Koning, who has some really cool research on gender and innovation. So that's again, it's really about translation and kind of getting the word out there about this great work. And then finally, as I said, we really think about how we can make sure to contribute to sort of diversity and inclusion, both in our own classrooms at HBS, but also just thinking about HBS as, we have a big influence on business education globally, right? Millions of cases are sold around the world. So what are we doing as a school to make sure that, our case protagonists collectively represent a diverse view of leadership, right? And not just this very narrow traditional way that, leadership, used to look, frankly. So we partner internally at the school and also with publishing on those sort of efforts. So that's, again, high level, but that's a bit about kind of what we actually do as the initiative. And I'll pause there. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Hopefully that made sense. I know I've kind of run through, a smorgasbord.
Not too much in the chat yet, but I was
Okay,
just
I just
going to
wanna
put
make
out
sure.
a request for anybody to ask
Oh.
questions. Put them in the chat or
Yeah, please, or raise your hand. And I do see
yeah.
We have
your
one,
question,
Sherry.
Sherry. Yeah.
So Sherry, just for everyone here, so Sherry has asked how much of our research is federally funded, and are you concerned about or making plans to shift the makeup of the funding to be able to continue this research?
Thank you. That is a great question, and I know it's kind of top of mind today for obvious reasons. So HBS is different from a lot of other institutions, even at Harvard, in that our faculty's research is funded directly by the school. So there's a few sort of special cases here and there where faculty have outside grants, but it's actually quite unusual, and it's just not the model of HBS. So fortunately, we're actually a bit at this time kind of insulated, at least from that, the impact of that particular decision. So it's not something that we are having to wrestle with, although certainly our colleagues, across the university are, and we, hopefully we'll be able to support them even just in terms of as a community. But it's not something that that we have to directly face? I think great question. Oh yes, so the newsletter, so I'll share a link at the end. You can go to our website and sign up. And we usually send something out monthly. As I said, we try to do a lot of, use the newsletter a lot to kind of spotlight interesting faculty research, right? So, you understand what's actually happening at the school, what kinds of research are people doing, how does it actually matter for practice, right? We kind of try to tell you, here's something our faculty are doing and here's how it matters for companies, but also other stuff, events, etc. So we can definitely get you signed up for that. All right. And, certainly, Deborah, I'm glad you asked that question because we are, we want to be a resource to alums broadly. So I have, you can probably see if you're reading ahead, like something on this slide that's relevant to that question, but there's lots of research on leadership style, both from HBS and beyond. So we have some stuff on our website, but please feel free to reach out to me directly too. I often, or the team, if you're interested in kind of knowing, okay, what does the literature say about this topic of gender and leadership style? We can kind of point you quickly toward, some classic HBRs and just resources for you. And we're working on, the school is in the midst of transitioning to a new website system that's going to be a lot more user-friendly for us as staff to be able to actually manipulate ourselves. So believe it or not, our website architecture is like a little bit old-fashioned, and it's a lot of stuff on the back end that's not very user-friendly. And so we are within the next calendar year, things move slowly in academia, but we are getting onto this new platform. But what it's really going to do for us as RGE is enable us to put a lot more resources online and curate them in a way that's a lot more user-friendly to you, right? So that's absolutely something that we are thinking about. How can we have some pieces of the website where we know there are these kind of just classic big topics people want to know about: leadership, mentoring, recruiting, right? And we actually have a lot of great stuff at the school to share with you. So a lot of it is online now on the site, but is a little bit hard to find. So please keep checking back over 2025 and we'll have more for you. But also please feel free to reach out to me or just the main inbox directly with questions like that, and we can point you toward resources. And yes, my contact, I'll have a bunch of stuff at the end with how to reach us. You can always email rge@hbs, but you can also email me. We'll share around, in a follow-up my information. And I'm very easy to find on the internet. So you can pretty much Google me, find my LinkedIn, find my HBS address. But, again, we want to be a resource to folks who care about these issues. All right, so I do want to take a few minutes and just kind of share some stuff that I think is new stuff that I think is interesting. And some pieces may be, more or less interesting to you. But I just wanted to kind of give you, again, almost like a teaser or a sampler platter of here are interesting insights from our faculty, and also to give you a sense of the breadth of what that work is, right? I think particularly today in this kind of heightened moment, the conversation about DEI can be very narrow, right? It's like, we're talking about hiring, or we're talking about whether companies are going to participate in pride parades locally. And that stuff is important, but there's much more to the domain and to the research than some of these kind of hot topics. So I wanted to just give you, just kind of a little sneak peek into what our faculty are doing. And again, this is faculty from a couple of different units doing a lot of different types of research, right? Like field studies, surveys, qualitative, quantitative. So I'm just gonna launch into it and kind of go through, again, a little bit of a laundry list, but all of this stuff, you can find more about this research on our website in terms of papers, both academic, and then also a lot of this has been covered by Working Knowledge or an HBR, and I'm happy to, to answer questions. But, we have a lot of questions, collectively about DEI and companies, and both what companies are doing and what they should be doing. So diversity training, right? This is one of my favorites because diversity training is something that, we'll see what happens obviously, over the, the upcoming months and years, but to date, diversity training has been one of the things that companies have invested most in, right? As they try to build inclusive and diverse workforces, right? It's like, okay, we need to train managers, we need to get people to understand concepts like implicit bias, we need to kind of do this general education of our workforce. And so the question is, how well does that really work, right? What kind of impact is that having? And so we have a faculty member here in the Negotiation, Organization, and Markets unit who has done several studies looking at this question exactly. And what the consistent thing he's found is that kind of the DEI training that a lot of your companies probably do. Frankly, also that happens at the university here at Harvard, the kind of general understanding implicit bias, understanding concepts around inequality. It can shift sort of people's attitudes and maybe make them a little bit more, disposed to acknowledge bias or acknowledge privilege, but it has not been shown to have a ton of impact on what people do, right? And he's measured action, very specifically in terms of, does this make people more likely to mentor younger women, right? For instance, does this make people more likely to kind of stick up for somebody of a different race or gender? And he's just not found a lot of impact on behavior from those kinds of trainings. So the kind of what he says typically when he talks about this is, he says this doesn't mean we shouldn't do that training, right? It's still important to educate people, but when we want to change behavior, what we need to do is make it really timely and targeted, right? So it needs to be not just kind of maybe something you do annually or when you get hired, but how do we educate people maybe when they are getting ready to make a hiring decision, right? Or when we're going through a promotion process, right? If your company has a formal promotion process. So really kind of make it targeted. So anyway, I think this is kind of an important one because, again, diversity training, it's big business. A lot of people out there charge a lot of money for it. While it may be beneficial, if we really want people to start changing their behavior so that we have more diversity and more equity, we probably need to do a little bit more than just the training. So one of the other ones I wanted to share was this from Professor Summer Jackson in the Organizational Behavior Unit. And this is another big one, right? So particularly in tech, but not just tech, she looked at a tech company because this is quite an issue there, but how do we get a more diverse pool, right? How do we make sure we're not just going back to kind of the same narrow pool, typically in tech of, white, male, educated at a small number of schools, group of people, and, getting a broader pool. So we're capturing talent that we're not tapping into yet. And there's a lot of, again, companies and tools out there to help managers do this. Again, these are vendors, these are things companies spend money on. So she did some ethnographic, deep qualitative research with a company and was looking at the fact that in this company, managers were not necessarily using these diversity recruiting platforms, right? So these are vendors that say, okay, here's a tool you can use to help draw in women, people of color, et cetera, and get them into your pool. And she was finding it didn't seem to be having that effect. And so did this deep dive, sitting in on meetings, talking to people, getting this granular understanding of what is going on sort of in managers' minds. And she found that how these kinds of tools are framed really makes all the difference, right? So what she was hearing from folks is that some of these tools felt very transactional to the managers, and it kind of triggered these moral concerns for them, like, are we just kind of viewing people almost as numbers? Is this actually kind of exploitive where we're just it's like, oh, we just want to get a person of color in this seat, right? And we're just viewing it in this very transactional way where we're not attending to who this person is. It felt kind of icky to them is, probably the right word. And so, the takeaway there is, and again, this is not too different from Professor Chang's research, is you need to frame this in a way that's relevant to your manager and your company, right? And sort of connect this back to your values and the kind of workforce you want to build and how you want to do it, right? So really making sure that when you use these tools, it doesn't come across like, oh, this is basically the same thing as you use for purchase order. Like we're just ordering diversity, right? In this way that really makes people feel disconnected from the why, right? Which is we want a more diverse candidate pool because we want to make sure we're getting the best talent. We want a more diverse candidate pool because we want, our workforce to be diverse so that people of all identities feel like they belong, et cetera. So framing really matters. So that was an interesting one from her. This is kind of a different one, specifically about, let me see. I think Karen had a question on this one. Let me look at this.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, so this is that's a good question and sort of nuance. It's a good, right? This is often just in general, right? Where, the managers
Exactly.
who are doing, implementing whatever the change is, right? That's where things get stuck. It's that classic frozen middle. So I don't know that that summer looked specifically at this, but I think you're probably onto something, because if it does feel very top down and very just like, okay, you have to use this tool, that probably contributes to that feeling, right? Of like, this is just another thing it's more of a check the box, right? And it kind of can even, what I think is interesting is probably people who are not disposed to endorse the diversity goal anyway may view this as transactional, but what she was hearing is from people who have those values, right? And who say, no, I support diversity, but this way of doing it feels off to me, and that was, which is, then you're sort of.
Which is also important, and that's valid. I mean, if there's not the right feel to the tool, they ought to take that back to the producer of the tool.
And that's exactly right. That's exactly kind of what, what she did is she sort of like, here's some recommendations. Again, if you are this type of, vendor, you need to frame it in the right way or people aren't going to use it, right? And I think it's particularly, to your point, it's valid and it's important, because then you're sort of saying, okay, there's probably a small percentage, well, there's a percentage of people who maybe aren't supportive of this anyway, but
Right.
Okay, so we don't want to alienate the people who actually are supportive, right? We want them to feel empowered and like, this is something that they want to do. So I don't know if she studied that piece, but I think my hunch would be when it does feel implemented in a very top-down way, that probably contributes to that feel of, again, this just being like, oh, it's a button that I click to order a diverse person, right? Which doesn't feel right, from for a lot of people ethically. And I want to see if.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a great question. Okay. Oh, that's great. Thank you for the, Jenny, about Edward Chang's research. He spoke about this at the summit. That's great. I mean, I think it's important to share this stuff. So I love that you're helping do that. So this finding from Professor Ali Feldberg is particularly about women, and it is a little bit connected, Deborah, to your question about leadership style. This is, it's not as broad as I think you were, you're interested in learning about. But I think this is an important piece of what we all know is this double bind that women face, right? So much of the work on women in leadership has been identifying, this way that women leaders are caught between wanting to show up in a way that feels leaderly and authoritative and, making decisions, et cetera, but that can trigger this, this bias, right, toward women behaving in ways that are traditionally understood as masculine, right? And so they may be seen as very competent and good at their job, but people don't really like them, they're cold, et cetera, et cetera. Or the flip side, right, where women try to show up in a way that, gets a positive response because it, is, oriented toward other people and warm and communal and all of that, which is what traditionally is expected of women, right? And so these are leaders that people think are very nice and they like to be around them, but often they're not seen as very competent. So it shows up in this particular way. We've talked about this too, as a school in terms of the research, a lot of times for women, in very high level positions, right? CEOs, et cetera, VPs, people in these, very generally, high paying, high status roles. But Ali is finding this is happening even for managers, right? In a retail setting, right? So people who are not, making that kind of money or have that kind of status, in their organization, they're just trying to manage a store. But what they're doing is realizing that they're not seen necessarily as leaders, and so they try to be really visible, right? They're like out doing stuff, in the store, on the floor, and they're getting, a good outcome from that in terms of their employees are seeing them as more leaderly, right? It's taking action against a certain type of gender bias. But what she finds is then that means they don't have enough time to spend on kind of the back office stuff, the reports and the analyses, et cetera. And so that performance actually goes down. So it's just another way that even in a setting where it hasn't been studied as much, that way that women are trying to kind of navigate this bias and put in this double bind really diminishes their performance. And what's important is that, if you just were seeing that they're not performing as well, you might attribute that to, them not being as good. But what's really going on is that they're put in this position where they're trying to navigate this bias, and it diminishes the time they can spend focusing on their actual job, right? And I'm sure, I imagine a lot of you, have felt that way. I'll just share a couple more on the research side. So, employee resource groups, these have also been a hot, a topic of a lot of conversation recently, and a lot of companies are thinking about them differently. Due to some of the legal, legal regulations that have shifted. Lumen Seekers has been researching them for a long time and really trying to understand what effect do they have on employees who have identities that are in the minority in their company. And I don't think this is probably going to be super surprising, but he's really looked at this empirically in a very interesting way and basically finding something we know, which is that intersectionality really matters, right? Women are not a monolith, right? Or any, people, any sort of identity, right? People are not just that identity, right? People show up with different identities. And particularly when people have multiple identities that are in the minority or are marginalized in some way, it can be really difficult for them to navigate the workplace, including these ERGs, or they're called affinity groups as well, business resource groups, but they're supposed to be set up to be supporting people. And sometimes it actually can unfortunately help to reinforce other hierarchies in the organization. So basically what he finds is that in this company he studied, Black women really felt kind of marginalized and alienated within the women's ERG because it felt very much like a white women's group to them. And he has quotes, he did qualitative work with this company, and there's a lot of quotes from Black women saying, they have these speakers, leaders in the company that I just cannot relate to. They seem out of touch. They don't understand what challenges I face. And so they found themselves, more active in the Black employees ERG, which was great, but also at the same time, that group didn't always pay attention to what they were facing as Black women specifically, right? I see Karen nodding, So this is something, we've heard about before, but he really looks at it to understand how does this really show up, again, in something that many, many companies do, right? ERGs are kind of standard at a lot of big companies. So it's important to understand how can we make sure that they are effective and that they are really serving people. So that's a great one. And then finally, I just wanted to kind of tee up, this is very cool, very new research about a topic that not very much is known about, which is non-binary folks at work. It's not something that's been studied. This is a very small population, so it's hard sometimes to get data that you can really look at rigorously. But Professor Katie Kaufman, who's also in the Negotiation Organization and Markets Unit, has done one of the first surveys. You're really looking deeply at the experiences of non-binary people in the workplace. And so there's, more about this. You can read about this on Working Knowledge, but basically finds, unfortunately, that they do report higher rates of discrimination than other groups. And also one thing that's interesting that was surprising to me is she also surveyed other, people who do not identify as non-binary, who identify as, male or female, what have you, and found that people tend to express more discomfort with non-binary individuals than with, LGBT folks, right? So it's a different kind of maybe, bias or just unease or discomfort, which also is maybe not surprising considering this is kind of like not something that, has been around in the culture visibly for that long, but is a little bit concerning when you think about, again, how people might feel around their colleagues. So I'll stop there with research. I know that's just like a lot of stuff to throw at you, but I wanted to, again, kind of give you a little smorgasbord. Thank you, Meredith. Yes, exactly. So I should have just said LGB there. So she looked at, thank you for that. What she looked at was how people reported comfort with people who identify as like lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, but as a binary gender, as male or female, versus people who identify as non-binary. You're absolutely right. They're part of that kind of cluster. But she's looking at how those of us, who do not identify as non-binary sort of react to or feel around non-binary folks. And so again, I think it's important to, to kind of just, again, this is really a descriptive study, and so she's just saying, look, we're not sure what to do with this yet, but now we know a little bit about what's happening with this population. And the question on age, yeah, thank you, Meredith. No, it's a good point. So it's a good question. I don't know of anything new from our faculty, particularly looking at like the intersection of age and gender, but I agree, it's a good question. I know personally, I've talked about this before in other webinars, interviews that I've done with senior women, I've definitely heard from them that they feel as they, particularly when they're kind of at the peak of their career, right? So maybe in a C-suite position or on a board, they're saying to me, I'm in my 50s or 60s at this point, and I do feel some age bias now, right? I do feel, and for instance, that the way that I'm expected to show up in a board meeting, how I'm expected to look, how I'm expected, to sort of presence, it seems very different from some of my male colleagues who are my same age, and there's a certain, again, just different set of expectations for women. But I will keep an eye out on if there's anything from our faculty on that topic, because, it certainly is real. So I wanted to just finally share, as I said at the beginning, a little bit about what we're hearing from practitioners and people in the DEI space. So we've done a series of focus groups. Well, let me just answer this question from Doyen. So Doyen is just asking if the Women's Leadership Summit is going to be happening again. And I saw you need to jump off, so I wanted to answer your question. So I don't know is the question. It was, I think we at the school were very pleased with, the reception and the appetite and how many people all showed up. And, I personally found it so inspiring, the conversations. It's an alumni relations conference, so I'm not fully in the loop on sort of the series of conferences that they're planning this year. I don't think there is a conference plan for 2025 or 26, but it's certainly something in the works. I do think we'll probably be doing some more regional convenings in the next few years. So I hope that answers your question. But I wanted to just share, what we've been hearing in these focus groups. So we've done, some conversations with, and these are across the U.S., conversations with DEI leaders in the U.S. Midwest, in the South, here in New England. And then we've done some cross-school conversations, bringing together others as well. So it's definitely a cross-section of industries and regions. And these are the themes we found, which again, I don't think are going to be surprising to anyone. But what we really have heard from, chief diversity officers and other DEI leaders is, that the portion of their time in their work that are really taken up with this risk management and reputation management and the way they work with legal counsel, both internal and external, has really shifted, right? So it's not, they always worked closely with, the general counsel, et cetera, at their organization, but they find that that is such a big part of their job now in a way it hasn't been in the past, right? And so they're really thinking both about how to manage legal risk, what they need to do and not do, how to negotiate that, as well as reputational risks, right? Because we're seeing, there's activists, customers, employees, right? One of them said, the quote was something like, "It just feels like we're operating in a very narrow space right now because there are so many stakeholders with a lot of opinions, and they're different too, right? You might have activist investors, pushing a company to, scale back its DEI commitments, and then employees, who are pushing, strongly the opposite way. So that was a big one, just in terms of what their job is like, right? It's really shifted, and they are working really hand in glove with legal counsel in a way that has really ramped up. In terms of what they're actually doing, the thing that we're hearing is that, again, and you've kind of read about this in the news, they are scaling back some stuff, right? So they may be saying, we had representation aspirations or goals, and we're kind of pausing those, right? Because we're worried that those are going to appear like quotas, even if that's not what they were. They're saying, maybe we're reducing some of the data we collect because we're concerned, that we could be exposing ourselves to legal risk there. And they're trying to think about, well, how do we still get the right information about what we need to know from employees, even if we're not collecting data in the same way? And then, of course, there's programs or initiatives that maybe were developed to, target, to be developmental for certain employees, women, et cetera. And they may say, well, we still want to have the same content, but we need to now make those more open, right, to reduce our legal risk. I'll pause there because I think there was a couple of questions. Let's see.
Someone's on their iPhone and they wanted to know about not the conference, not the alumni conference, but Doyen is asking
Oh, I'm sorry.
the Gender Race Spring
symposium
conference.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the symposium we are holding. Yes, we did not hold one in 2025 for just some reasons kind of internal to the faculty, but we will be holding one in 2024. We will be holding one in 2025. I apologize. I was thinking
That's all right.
about the WLS. So yes, that will be happening in the spring, the faculty conference. And Karen, did you have a question? Did I miss anything else on the
Well,
chat?
yes, I have a question, and maybe just a sort of like a temperature test of the people on this call. You're using the terminology, we see that people are scaling back. But from where I sit in a heavily government-oriented town, Huntsville, Alabama, huge NASA, DOD, and DOJ presence, it's more than scaling back. People are actually traumatized about the language being used right now in terms of eliminate, fire, emails in the night. So it's just,
Yeah.
I appreciate the professional nature of the wording, but frankly, I feel there's a crisis going on.
Yeah. Well, that's very fair. And I have to admit, we conducted this, these groups and put together, this slide,
Right.
before the most recent, past week or two. And you're right. I mean, I think that's a fair point, right? It is different, right? And they were talking about, yeah, these conversations, yeah, we're sort of, those were kind of what words they were using, right? Well, we're scaling back this, or we're pausing this, or we're,
Right.
shifting this. But I think if we went back and had these same conversations today, I think you're right that there would be some different.
Well, and I think there's difference. What I really wanted to point out was corporate versus government,
True.
and that all of this research has to be updated, right now in these times. It's not obsolete. It is absolute truth as to what was happening at that time. But now we need maybe new research, almost the same subjects, this and that and the other, approximately, but in the new political environment, the answers will not be the same. I guess I just want to say the belonging. It's, people are terrified. So belonging, I would say, is like about zero right now for some of my friends. They're just wondering if, and they're not even necessarily the DEI responsible entity in the HR or the legal department. They are just saying, hey, what if people think I'm a DEI hire? Does that mean I'm going to lose my job?
Right. Right. People feel very like targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
So
really
do you
appreciate
think
that.
there's going to be a shift in the research to really address some of the, the deep psychological, or just, just
Mm.
shifting research?
That is a very, well, I really appreciate that, because I think
That's
that,
up to the faculty. I'm not trying to direct their research. Let me say, I realize that's a loaded question, but if there's anything that you feed back to them, just say, everyone
yeah,
appreciates all the work that you're doing. We love that this information is documented, and there might be a call for, accelerated, or at least updated in light of the times.
yeah, I mean, yes, I don't, have a crystal ball in terms of what the faculty will do, but agree with you that we need to be looking at this. And certainly I know a lot of the faculty are, you know,
I'm sure they're concerned.
Yeah,
They're
both.
hearing the news. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I've had multiple faculty, especially people, similarly, who do research in this domain, right? Even though, again, those at the school, right, we don't, they're not getting federal money. Well, first of all, it's still scary, to your point. People still, I think, feel kind of targeted, based on the work they do, and often their identity, right? People who do this work often are people who have different, minority identities, as well as, they have plenty of friends and colleagues, right, around the country, who are not at a institution that funds research the way HBS does. So it is very scary. And certainly, I think from a research perspective, this is going to be something that people are looking at. And probably those, I would guess those who do qualitative kind of work, right, where they talk to people and interview people and go into organizations, are going to be studying exactly the what you're talking about, which is the trauma, frankly, that people feel from, the current, what's happening right now, how kind of leaders are grappling with this, right? And what is the array of responses, right? Because, leaders are in companies, right, thinking about, the private sector, are responding differently, right? And why? Why do some feel like we are going to maintain what we're doing? This is important. We're going to follow the law, but we're not going to abandon our values, whereas others may not be doing that. I mean, I think there are a lot of research questions. But I appreciate you saying that, just to call out sort of like the particular moment in time we're in, and I wish I had, more, I don't know, more.
Well, we have to give them time. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to give them time, because if it's going to be respected research and a lot of qualitative information, it's going to take time to collect it. And they also maybe don't want to just get things right where they're raw, but also maybe give some time for things to dampen down a bit. But I have to say, it just so happened I was reading an article in one of the HBR, must reads little booklet. This morning. I keep it by my bedside when I can't sleep. But anyway, it was about the culture of trust. And so with all of this mistrust and feeling of targeting, I'm sure the people who do the qualitative research are, at some point when there's enough data, going to be able to show how this is an economic negative impact when your workforce doesn't feel safe. And, imagine just, we say the fastest growing companies have a culture where failure is accepted. Now, imagine how people are going to tamp down on either whistleblowing or admitting failure or documenting failure so they can move on because they feel that will be used against them in a targeting environment.
That's a great point. I mean,
There's so many implications.
absolutely. I mean, Amy Edmondson here at the school, right, who really pioneered the concept of psychological safety, right? And this is what her new book is about, right? It's to say you got to have intelligent failure, and if you're not in an environment where people sort of can raise their hand and say, "Oh, I see a problem," or "Oh, there's an error," that I'm seeing, like, or this happened, and you can dissect it, understand why, learn from it. I mean, you've already lost the plot, basically, right? If you can't do that.
Yes.
I think that's a great.
Yes, that's for me. I yield the balance of my time.
No, I appreciate that. I think that really, again, these are all interesting themes we heard, but you're kind of putting the broader context of kind of like the gravity of the situation, right? Particularly, certainly all of us, but all, people in these DEI leadership roles are dealing with. So I think that's a great note to kind of wrap up on. I mean, I think, what you're saying is very relevant here. A lot of the things we heard is, people are searching for how do we shift and how do we, one of the things we heard is, okay, how do we sort of, I invoke universal principles, right? So that we can avoid these attacks on words that have become politicized, right? Even if that was not really what they're about or what the intention was. How do we fight maybe some of this misinformation, et cetera, about what DEI is by leaning on, everybody wants a fair workplace. Everybody wants, opportunity to be, fairly distributed. So that's a big theme that we heard. And I think, frankly, people are still trying to figure out how to do that, but that was something we definitely heard a lot about. And then to your point, I mean, I think this is relevant to your point, just we have seen a lot of appetite for these conversations and for community, right? People are struggling, I think even more so now. So we're certainly trying to provide that as RGE. And again, really with Biggs, I want to call out them as partners to say, we have the resources and the convening power to bring people together. We don't necessarily have the answers, but we can say, hey, we want to hear what you're dealing with. Like, this matters. We have researchers who want to understand what's happening in the field. Like, we can be a community for you. So I think that's a sobering but good note to end on. And I was just going to show my last slide, some ways to get connected with us. So here is links to our newsletter, to, our LinkedIn, et cetera. I'll share these, I'll send these slides, to the group. We can circulate these. And then just to call out a relatively new initiative that we've started this year that Daniela, our associate director, is spearheading, the Alumni Board Diversity Network, which is intended to really harness the power of the HBS network to connect more of our alums who, are from a group that is underrepresented on boards currently, with our alums and others who, know about those openings, right? Who may be at private equity firms or on a board, right? Just to create a much stronger network and better information flow, frankly, about these opportunities. So the link here is you can sign up for the mailing list of, to be part of the network. We've got over 800, I think, alums who have said, hey, I want to be part of this. And then the school, we can't take credit for this, the alumni board did this, but the school established a partnership with Equilar, which is a board search database. So you can put your information and profile into an HBS folder there. And that is something that companies can leverage when they're looking for board candidates, but also we as RGE and the BDN will be leveraging as we build out a mechanism to kind of share opportunities where we can go into that Equilar database and say, give me the list of all the alums who've joined who are, have a healthcare background, for instance, and then we can send out an opportunity we may have, for a board seat in healthcare. So please connect with us. I know we've got just a couple minutes left, but I'll stop sharing. And are there any questions I missed in the chat or burning questions or comments, that people want to share? I really appreciate all the thoughtful reactions and questions.
If no one's going to ask a question, I'll take the time. So I just posted in the chat that my business is around helping executive women thrive in the C-suite. And recently I've had to change my positioning to be more about focused on chief marketing officers more generally, because companies have told me they no longer want to, quote, invest in women. It is infuriating. I quit my job as a CMO to start this company focused on women because I'm so passionate about it. And now I'm having to back away from it based upon how the DEI pendulum has swung. And I'm wondering if you or any of the brilliant women on this call have advice for me as I continue to navigate trying to grow my teeny little startup.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have any brilliant advice. Definitely others may. I mean, I think first of all, thank you for doing that and for, trying to figure out how to persist in this moment. I think what we've heard from, these conversations and others is really that people are trying to be creative, right? About how to sort of sustain and keep doing what we're doing. We know the pendulum is going to swing back. We just don't know sort of when or what's going to happen in the interim. I mean, please feel free, to reach out, to me, of course, we want to, be supportive of these kinds of efforts that our alums are engaged in. But unfortunately, I think it's hard to know right now too. A lot remains to be seen. But I certainly would, be happy to hear if Deborah and maybe you wanted to jump in with some
Well,
advice.
no, I
I'm sure I
wanted
have
to
words of wisdom.
I wanted to thank you that, when we scheduled this, we had no idea that the timing was going to be like just so incredibly perfect. I mean, and it's opened up all this conversation that we've probably all been holding inside for the last week.
I know. It's and I
Meredith
think
has
Meredith had a question. Yeah.
Oh, hi everyone, thanks. I was thinking about, I think Jenny is how you say it, your comment. There are organizations like Costco that are not sort of succumbing to the pressure of this administration. And I think to the extent that we are using our economic power to affect change, like I love, Colleen, your optimism that the pendulum is going to swing back. But we are not, there's no guarantee based on the level of racism and discrimination and sheer terror that is being unleashed right now that we have a clear path. Like we are in many ways, I think, starting over. I'm a white woman. Hopefully white women will realize the ways in which they have benefited from these programs more than any other group and will start to think about how to use their own power in all of this. But I just like, it is true the timing is what it is and the research has been done, but I think if ever there has been a time to put ourselves and our power and our positioning on the line, it is right now, because this is a time like no one in our sort of lifetime or generation has seen. And those who have intersectional identities, I am sending all of you like love and warmth and care. I happen to be among like a cisgendered white woman, so I'm not as scared day to day of like a knock on my door, but like that is an unfair and disgusting privilege, and we all have work to do. And so I am just wishing safety to everyone and hoping that we find ways to actually fight back with our feet and with our pockets, and really boycott the organizations that are completely destroying the fabric of our integrity. So I wish us all luck. And I'm excited that people from HBS are having this conversation because there's a whole lot of white male power in this institution. And I would also like to bust that up. But thank you for having the conversation. But my God, do we have work ahead of us?
Yeah, I could not have said it better. I feel like that's a great note to end
thank
on.
you so much. Meredith, thank you for those comments. And I think the theme here seems to be, regardless of what is happening, of ability to evangelize and say things at the macro level, we all have influence and power at the micro level in our communities. And this may be a time where we need to ramp that up tenfold. And Colleen, we are happy that you are there collecting the research,
Yes.
and continues in this. So thank you so much for joining us. I posted in the chat Colleen's contact information from her HBS directory card. So if you have further questions, but we really appreciate all of your attendance and participation. It's been a great conversation. Colleen, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you
right.
for all you're doing. So timely.
Thank you.
See you all soon. Thank you.